Hello and good evening and welcome to this webinar on mastering chaos project management skills that employers crave. And today we are going to discuss projects procurement. My name is Dr. Akram Ali and I am the provost of South Europe College. We know what's stated here is Murphy's Law, Murphy's first law actually, which states it always takes longer and costs more. And we have also another saying which says Murphy's laws in project management works over time. So project management is a very, very, very uncertain profession, which requires significant amount of diligence from the project management team. But what we say here is maybe not, because actual statistics has proven that when projects are managed by competent project managers, they have almost 75% increase in probability of success over projects managed by project managers who are not competent and trained or certified project managers. So this is why we say maybe not. It might not take longer or cost more. And this is actually the theme of our series of webinars, which is Mastering Chaos. Projects might be total chaos if it's managed by someone who does not know what to do. But competent project managers can make visions and dreams realize into reality through controlling chaos. And this is the kind of skills this series of webinars is intended to equip its attendees with. So also here we have to remember what Sun Tzu in his book Arts of War stated about wars. Or outcome of wars is decided in temples even before the troops march. And what he meant here is preparation or planning is the key to success. And in project management, we say failing to plan is planning to fail. When I personally started managing projects, I early on realized that because I was a junior project manager, so I actually started in projects at the execution stage, very late stage in a project life cycle. And I was not trained in project management at the time yet. So when I started out, even without appropriate training at all, I was just a graduate engineer, I realized that good contracts made life easier. So when I associated Sun Tzu's statement, outcome of wars is decided in temples before the troops march out, I associated it with good contracts. But then I realized, or as I became more and more experienced project manager, I realized that there is always a planning phase before everything. So to me, when I started out, I thought contracts was the starting point. But in order to have good contracts, you need good procurement cycle. And in order to have good procurement cycle, well, there are many things that has to be in place. And this is what our topic of today. So when we say outcome is decided in contracts for projects, we say no, it's decided in procurement. But is it really decided in procurement, or are there phases before procurement that has to be considered? Well, as we start to go down the rabbit hole, we realize there is always a pre or a planning phase for everything. Even the planning phase needs to have a planning phase. So when we come to consider in the project life cycle a planning phase, we have to have a planning for the planning phase itself. So it's always planning, and project management controls chaos through planning. That's why we say plan your work, then work your plans. And this is what project management is all about. But it's not that simple. So today we're going to take a certain process, which is the process of procurement, and we are going to take a look inside it and understand the different dimensions that constitute a project procurement process. Like we have mentioned before, it always takes longer and costs more. This is actually the statement of Murphy's Law. And we believe it works double time in project management, even when there is a competent and certified project manager. However, a certified project manager can impart so much more control over a project than when the project manager is not trained and competent and certified in project management. So like we said, what's procurement? Procurement is the process of acquiring the external goods and services required to complete the project. And like we said, external, we decide if it's external through a make or buy analysis or exercise. So if we make a make or buy analysis and the result is buy, so we are going to go into our procurement loop. So what's the objective of procurement? The objective of procurement is to choose the correct subcontractors and suppliers. So when we speak about correct subcontractors, we have two very distinct and very important practices that assures an organization that they are employing the correct subcontractors and suppliers. Okay. Before we go any further, if you want a project to succeed, number one, which may be 90% of project success, is assigning a competent project manager. If you don't have a competent project manager, you are going to have less than 10% chances of your project to succeed. So 90% of success is a competent project manager, and the competent project manager with the procurement team have to make sure that they procure the correct subcontractors and suppliers. So you see, procuring a project manager, again, because when you select a project manager, it's procurement of a project manager. It's 90% of success. And here the remaining 10%, 9% is selecting the correct subcontractor. So if you have a correct project manager plus correct subcontractors, you have a probability of over 99% of project success. If you don't have it, your chances of success is just you have to be like really lucky to succeed. But methodologically, you will not succeed. You need to procure a competent project manager, and you need to procure correct subcontractors. So in order, we have two very important practices that assure us we are procuring the right people or the right contractors or the right suppliers or whatever. What we call pre-qualifications. And a short route to pre-qualifications for contractors is when the contractor has an ISO certification. ISO certification. If the contractor has ISO certification, the relevant ISO, but let's say here 9001. Okay, is this well, just make this program. So like I was saying, when a certain supplier has an ISO certification, it makes pre-qualification a lot easier. Why is it a lot easier? Because the ISO audit is a pre-qualification audit. What we mean by an ISO certified contractor or an ISO certified supplier or a producer, it means he has a management system that is sufficient to make sure that he can deliver what he promises. And when we do pre-qualification, but it's not just ISO certification, but ISO certification makes it easier for us, so we don't have to really check the management system of the supplier. But we need to make sure he has enough money. So we need to have like statements of funding, and we need to have bank account credit, how much credit he has in his bank account. What else? We need to know his HSE record, his success record. So we need the supplier to provide us with many documents, and we also need to make certain checks to make sure we can hire this supplier, and this is called pre-qualification. And when we are working with governments, for example, we can only procure or even invite to tender or solicit to the already pre-qualified vendors, and we use what's called the pre-qualified vendors list. And the governments have got, for example, during August or September, they start to they announce they are going to open the register of pre-qualified vendors or suppliers, and a vendor or supplier just presents all his documents, and then he's already pre-qualified. So like we said, in order to make sure we have the correct subcontractors and suppliers, number one, we have to have pre-qualifications. And for like government entities, it's easier because I can only invite to tender suppliers who are already in a pre-qualified list. But what else is the other practice is lessons learned. So pre-qualification is before I start procurement. I use pre-qualification. But when I finish the entire project, I have what's called lessons learned. And very important when I'm filling out lessons learned to include a statement related to the performance of the contractor and whether we should hire this contractor again or we should blacklist this contractor. So I have to check when I'm doing procurement, I have to make sure he is in a pre-qualified list, or if he is not in the pre-qualified list, I need to perform the pre-qualification exercise if it's permitted. And I also need to check lessons learned within or even without our organization. So this is why reputation is a huge risk for contractors. Reputation. Because even if you are qualified and you made the pre-qualified list, if we ask around and we obtain lessons learned from even people not working with us in the same organization, and if the reputation is damaged, we cannot bring this subcontractor on board. Because like we said, we're just going to write it again, a good project manager is 90% of the success. Good supporting subcontractors is 9% of the remaining 10%. So all what remains, all the risks and all the challenges of remaining project management, which is like a real huge world, it's only 1%. If you get these wrong, no matter what you do, you can never succeed in your project. So again, the objectives of procurement is to support all project objectives and to fully procure project scope. And in order to do this, we decompose the project using what is known as WBS. And again, doing appropriate WBS is very important for our contract management, because when we do it right, we have proper procurement packages which we can solicit to tender. And if we don't have proper packages, then again we have a big problem. We will not do proper procurement. And when we do contracts, we need to have our milestones list. And if WBS is not done properly, we cannot obtain a solid and meaningful milestones list. And it has to be a reproducible and repeatable disciplined approach. So who is involved in procurement? The client, because the client will give us his requirements. What does he want? The requirements. He's going to use the end user, his end user. And he's paying for it. And he's the owner and operator and whatever else. He's our client. So we have a designer or an architect which is going to take this information and produce design and specification. And through breakdown of design and specifications, we are going to have our procurement packages, which we are going to award to contractors. Main contractors, head contractor or main contractor is the same meaning. And the head contractor is going to have specialized trade contractors. So all these parties are involved in the project, because here what we are going to procure is what we are going to end up with at the end of the project. So if we procure something wrong, we did not understand the client wrong, at the very end, we are going to deliver a wrong product. So everybody has to be involved in defining what is going to be achieved. So what does procurement answer? Procurement answers, what scope do we need to deliver? Scope. What's the best way to deliver it? When do we need to engage the market? And what we mean by the market, we mean the contractors or the suppliers. Who are the potential subcontractors? And for this, we are going to see how to decide it. This is a very important step, very, very important step. And sometimes, like I said, if you work for big organization or the government, it's straightforward because you already have a pre-qualified list, and you just going to invite whoever is in the pre-qualified list. But if you don't have this list, so you need to generate this list. So who's responsible for generating such a list in normal practices? The designer or the engineering consultant. Engineering consultant will provide a list, will provide a list, but it's not the list. It's a list. It's the starting point, but whoever is responsible for procurement have to also try to find and qualify more suppliers than provided by the engineering consultant, and this will become the list. What documentation do they require? So in order to perform procurement of services or procurement of goods, you need to have the design, you need to have the quantities, you need to have the specifications, you need to have information. You have to communicate. You have to have an appropriate way to communicate to these people what the client wants, what this person wants. What this person wants. Let's make an arrow from this side. What this person wants. You need to communicate it in an appropriate manner by stating the design, the quantities, and the specifications levels required. And if there are preferred subcontractors, because sometimes through lessons learned or through specialized agreements, for example, sometimes the government will have preferred subcontractors or preferred contractors because the government, for example, is building a road, and I am a project management consultancy and I am going to manage this project. So the government will give me the list of contractors I need to use to build this road. Most of the time, these contractors are companies in which the government is an investor. So the government wants to give the work to its own establishments or institutions, so that they support the income of the companies the government is investing in. So it's a balancing act. Procurement is a balancing act because sometimes the lowest cost is a big mistake. So if you go for low cost and poor safety, for example, you're going to have delays, you're going to have penalties, and it might end up costing you more. And at the other extreme end, you can go for the highest quality and the best corporations to perform the project for you, And even though they have high quality, but again, they have an extreme cost, highly cost. So it depends on if it's like really important, really unique. Maybe it justifies to use the high quality and high cost contractors. But if it's somewhere in the middle, then maybe it's wiser to choose somewhere in between. So procurement is all about decisions which require balancing the different variables. So what is the procurement process? The procurement process is 2 steps. Number 1, planning procurement, and number 2 is executing procurement. So let's take a look at planning procurement. It's all the preparation activities we do before we begin engaging subcontractors and running tenders. The questions answered: how do we complete procurement? What scope do we need to complete? What's the best way to complete it? What scope do we need to procure? When do we complete procurement? So when here is related to what we refer to as procurement schedule. Procurement schedule is part of project schedule. Project schedule. So a certain material is required on site, in a certain date. So procurement has to make sure it is on site in this required date. If it comes very early, it's not good because it's going to give us problem related to storing it. And if it comes very late, it becomes a huge problem because it's going to destroy our performance schedule. So planning is 3 steps, which is develop procurement plan and identify what we need to procure and prepare procurement schedule. So we have a strategy, and we have the scope, and we have the schedule. Then we have our procurement plan. Executing procurement is engaging potential subcontractors and awarding packages. So when we are executing procurement, we have to determine the market, and like I said, we use a pre-qualified list if we have it. Otherwise, we are going just to mention how we do it now. And then we develop the tender packages, and we manage the tender, and then we award the contracts. So when we say procurement is successful, we mean it has been managed effectively by the delivery team. It had a clear scope of works for every contractor and every vendor and every supplier. And there is a logical and reasonable allocation of risk. And this is part of contracting, because the contract allocates risk. Who bears more risk? And the allocation of risk between seller and buyer determines the type of contract to be used. Type of contract to be used. And of course, the project schedule in association with the procurement schedule has to be also realistic. So what we mean by a clear scope, it's very important to say fully procured, because we have always to perform what is known as gap analysis, continuous gap analysis for our procurement practice, because sometimes when we do our WBS, we miss some packages. So we award our project without some parts, and the project will not function without it. And if we miss it and we don't realize it until it's very late, then it becomes a problem because it's going to delay our project. So it's very important that each subcontractor has a clear scope, knows what is in his scope and what is out of his scope, So he gets a scope statement. The scope statement has to mention both in scope and out of scope. And like I said, we have to periodically do a procurement schedule gap analysis using mainly two techniques. One is WBS review, and the other technique is called battery limit drawings. Okay, so we need to have a fully procured project. So after we audit our gap analysis and we make sure everything is included and each contractor has a clear scope, what he should do. But a fully procured project, it means every part of the project has been awarded to a responsible entity to execute it. Also, it have to have a clear responsibility of each and every subcontractor, and interfaces clearly defined. And what we mean by interfaces, we mean communication channels. And communication planning is the most important, or one of the most important functions that the project manager has to excel at. Okay. Procurement schedule. So we say procurement is conducted within the project schedule. So the procurement schedule is part of the project schedule. So when we are developing a procurement schedule, we need to have a structure for procurement. We need to understand the activity duration. Every activity you are procuring, how much time does it take? And then what we perform, what is known as a forward pass and a backward pass, to understand our early start and late finish for each and every activity. So this is an example of a procurement schedule, and it has a list of all our tender packages, and we get this list from our WBS. This comes out from the WBS. And each package has got its name here, and here it has this dictionary. And here we say we need to have a date when we should prepare the tender documentations. So it's a question mark here. Then we have to say, to review a tender package, we need 1 week, and to release a tender package, we need 1 week to release it, and a tender closing is 1 month, and the tender review by the subcontractor is 1 week, and contract award is 2 weeks, and work delivery 2 weeks. So we really here have we have time. But we can go to our master schedule and find out when this has to start. So our start date here is dictated by our schedule. So this is our forward pass. We were adding all this time. Now we are going to trace back our backward pass. So we understand when is our late start. We need to have our procurement documents ready no later than this date. So we add all required time, and we subtract all the required time from the start date according to our execution schedule. to understand when we need to have our procurement tender documentation ready. So this is how we generate our procurement schedule to be in line and part of and within the project schedule. Okay, so we need to understand who is going to provide us with the services. So we need to understand our supply chain. So we need to find out which companies can do the jobs. Okay, so here just this is a side note. Filtering is required, and filtering is done through vendor pre-qualification, and of course, like we said, also review of past lessons learned. So again, if I invite everybody, then I will have to assess the tenders or bids of everybody. It will take time. And like you see here, and for example, this is a very simple project. Just this is a very simple part of a project where we need to have a lamp post. You need to have a light in the street, just a lamp post. So it has civil works for lighting, supply lighting poles. You need a crane service to do it. You need supply distribution. So you see, it's just to have just one street lamp. You need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 contracts. So you have to invite at least 3 contractors for every package of these packages. So it's like a really challenging task to perform procurement and contracting. So you cannot really invite everybody. So you really have to have filtering process and really know what you should do and what you should just transfer it to somebody else to do it. Otherwise, perfection will overwhelm you. Okay, sometimes we have a single source procurement, which is a single vendor. Like for example, if I am like the electricity company in a certain country, so I need to have what we called spill or spare parts interchangeability. So I need to have all my switch gear from the same vendor. For example, let's say from Europe, we have like European vendor and we have like Asian vendors. So I need to have a single vendor, I'll call him Europe, so that my inventory of spare parts is limited. But if I have a mix of Europe and Asian, then I will have to have a huge inventory of parts, and the technicians and everything becomes more complicated because you need to train technicians on how to work with European items, and you also have to train them to work with Asian items and keep spare parts for everything. It becomes too much. So sometimes for certain activities, like here seen in the picture, for example, electrical parts, whatever it is, it's preferred or advised by the end user is to purchase these items from a certain vendor. So you have a single source. So you have to buy it from him. Okay, so how do we find contractors if I don't have, and this we call it preferred vendor list, because sometimes it's not only single vendor, it's preferred, we call it the preferred vendor list. Preferred vendor list. It could be a single vendor or 2 or 3 vendors, for example. But what if I don't have a pre-qualified list? I need to start registering and pre-qualifying vendors from the beginning. So I need to make advertisement. I say I have a certain tender, I have this tender, please come and buy the booklet, which has got the terms and conditions, so I can register you for this tender. And sometimes we have a project team experience. So we have a project team who have done similar projects and they already know a few vendors who can do it. So they will give us the list of names they have. And also, like we said, the company or client experience, the company might have also a list and the company will have a list, and the engineering consultant and the design firm is also required to provide us with a list. So we start to have these lists, and we have our, everybody here is a list, like we said, a list. And when we combine all these lists, we get the list, which has all the qualified vendors for a certain activity. So when I am pre-qualifying a contractor, number one is ISO or management system / management system, financial security, health and safety, legislative, and unique if it is a supplier that has special expertise and he's a sole supplier for a certain service or good. So subcontractors input to tender process. Like I said in the slide, which has got our client and it's got our designer and it's got our suppliers and sub-suppliers. I said they are all need to be involved in defining the end project. So we need to have like, we need to first of all decide the scope, and we need to see the price options from the different suppliers. And we request the suppliers to do value engineering. They can give us a better design than what we are proposing. And maybe there are some constructability issues. Again, the contractors will review our design, the work of our design consultant, and make critique with regards to value engineering. They can have a better idea, or constructability issues if it's not possible to construct. Because subcontractors are going to perform the work, so they are the experts at their scope, and the more we engage with them, the better the outcome we will get. And of course here, not only the more, also the earlier. We have to engage them as early as possible during our design and contracting stages. So now we have our tender packages, and a tender package is a set of documents that define a potential subcontractor's scope. Tender package contents. So we have instructions. This comes from the company. The design and specifications. This comes from our engineering contractor. Engineering design and engineering contractor will be supplied. And the scope of work and the pricing schedule and the management plans. This is a joint work between the procurement team and the other people in the performing organizations. And finally, we have the contracts, and the contracts is also shared between legal department and procurement department. So we have what is known as invitation to tender form, scope of works, pricing schedule, design, quality, form of contract. So again, we go back to our tender packages. So we need to have sufficient details to quote, but not useless information. Commercial delivery team. So we have instructions, which is invitation to tender. Okay, so we have invitation to tender summarizes the tender process and requirements for potential tenderers. So an invitation to tender form answers the overall tender process, how they can bid, how to bid, how to bid, and how to lodge tenders, key contacts, tender documentation, returnables, tender duration, tender evaluation criteria, request for information, and addendum process. And finally, we have contracts, and just unfortunately, we don't have the time to go through contracts. But just to understand, just quick. Okay, we have the most common types of contracts we have. We have a subcontract agreement for main contractors and subcontractors. We have minor works agreement. We have supply only agreement. We have purchase order. So as the scope becomes smaller, less, we move down this list. So we have a purchase order, we have a plant hire agreement, we have labor hire agreement, we have service agreement, and finally professional services agreement. And by this we come to the end of our webinar. And if you have any questions, I'll be very glad to answer your questions. Okay. Nobody raised his hand. Nobody opened his mic to ask a question. So I believe we don't have questions. Once again, I thank you very much for your attendance. And once again, I hope it has been valuable information communicated during our webinar today, and that's been beneficial for you. And until next time, very soon, to continue our attempt to communicate how project managers can control the chaos in projects. Thank you very much and have a very, very blessed evening.